Well, we've got an absolutely cracking day, and perhaps something a little bit special. The mist is wafting about the place. It was misty here just a second ago, it's gone now. We are gaining a bit of height, and I dare say we'll be up above the mist at some point. I'm in Renfrewshire, and I'm heading for Walls Hill. It's really just a large plateau. I wouldn't really call it a hill, but I think it is about 225 metres above sea level, and I imagine we may get pretty decent views towards Paisley and Glasgow. This is a bit special because Walls Hill is a hill fort, an Iron Age hill fort. But because of its size, it's about 500 by 200 metres. That plateau, a kind of tear-shaped or pearl drop-shaped plateau. Because of its size, it's one of the largest in Scotland, occupied way back in the Iron Age, and perhaps also in medieval times, in fact. But because of its size, it may not have been just a hill fort. This could have been a defended town belonging to an ancient Celtic tribe, the Damnonii, forgive the pronunciation, because long ago, before the Romans arrived, before Scotland was Scotland, the country was divided up into various kingdoms, all controlled by particular tribes. And way back then there were no aeroplanes. So let's go up here and see what's going on. Get blinded by the light here. What an absolutely beautiful track that is coming up there. I don't think I said earlier on, but I got a train from Glasgow to Howwood and followed from Station Road. You got to Midtown Road, then turn right. Initially it's a little road and then there's a fence, and after the fence I think it's been a road at one time because it is tarmacked, although it's mainly stones. It's just beautiful. We've kind of come over another fence there and we're on a kind of track proper. I'm thinking I can see Walls Hill in the distance, I'm not sure. This is a fairly short walk, just what you need at this time of year. I think it's roughly 3 miles there. I'll end the video on the top of the hill and 3 miles back to Howwood and the train home. But as I said earlier, just in addition to a little bit of exercise, and it's a stunning morning, it really is. There's been a very wet spell of weather. Today and tomorrow we're a kind of bit of a weather window, decided to go today. And you know, add on top of that a kind of little bit of history. And quite an important little bit of history, if my kind of guesswork is even remotely close to the mark. This could be a pretty major archaeological site, of which very little is actually known about. So let's have a closer look at it. This is the old steading of North Castlewalls, which sits in the north of the of Walls Hill and the fort there. On the south side of the hill there was another steading called South Castlewalls, and both of these names give you a pretty big clue as to what was going on here in the past. Castle and walls, you know, that's a big clue that something was happening of a castle-y nature and a wall thing. It's always very sad when you see these steadings in a ruinous state. In some maps this was still occupied. I think this was occupied more recently than South Castlewalls. But you know, obviously it's not good to go into these buildings because they're ruinous and it's dangerous. But nevertheless you can have a peek there and see the divided up stalls where the cattle would have been kept, perhaps for milking or kept when the weather was bad. People would have lived here and got on with their lives and farmed the land. And it's very wet land, most of it. There's not really anything to see on top of Walls Hill, and the remains of the hill fort are kind of gone really. There's going to be the odd kind of hint of a bank. I think there's even a hint of kind of terraces on the western side of the hill. There might be an occasional wall, a stone rather, kind of remains of a kind of a wall. What we're really going to do when we get up there is just to have a look at the hill itself and how it sits in the landscape, because how it sits in the landscape very much is why it's there, why it was a hill fort, and I'll perhaps talk a bit more about that later. I don't know if I said earlier, I've not been here before. You know, I've picked an absolutely glorious morning. I'm in my element. It's stunning. There's nothing better than being on a bit of ground that you've never been on before. So let's have a look at the hill. This is a very significant wall. I don't know what its purpose was. It's made of huge boulders. I'm guessing, but I strongly suspect that it dates to about the same time as the hill fort. There's something significant about it that I can't put my finger on, but it runs down from the sort of escarpment at the side of the plateau. So it's outside the defences of the fort. And it comes down here towards a small bit of water. Yeah, it's not got a name on my map, but it's just a small loch. Why would they construct this here? unless it's some sort of defence for an area that was used, that was outside the main defended part of the fort. Oops. I probably said umpteen times, and I'll probably say again, but this whole area of land is just very wet. There's any number of parts that have been lochs or reservoirs that have been dammed, and they've come and gone over the years. Lochs have appeared and disappeared. And it's just, the whole area is very marshy, and I strongly suspect that it would not be out with the bounds of possibility for this hill fort to have been almost totally surrounded by water at some stage, perhaps when it was occupied. And if that was the case, then that in itself provides a really good defence for the occupants of the fort. Not only have you got a walled defence, you also have water around that. You know, in any parts where there wasn't water, that's where you're forcing any invaders to attack you from. You can concentrate your defences in that area. But I am fascinated by this wall. This says something that I can't quite read. And I think it says something about this particular spot right here, as opposed to the other side of the wall. Something used to go on here long ago, and when I look at the ground there, it's grassy, a few stones. There's something definitely going on in this particular spot. It is reasonably featureless up here on top of Walls Hill and inside the hill fort. As I may have said at the start of the video, you know, Walls Hill, it's known as an Iron Age hill fort. And very little excavation has taken place in the fort. And for that reason, very little is actually known about it. It's been identified as a hill fort, Iron Age hill fort, and I think some archaeological excavation took place in the 1950s. We didn't really find a great deal, the odd bit of pottery and perhaps a little kind of hint of maybe a little round circular hut thing. Very scant evidence, but the conclusion was that, yeah, Iron Age fort. But it was also reckoned that while it would have been abandoned when the Romans arrived, when was that, 1st century AD or whenever, and given the size of this fort, if not a town, where did all these people go? They just sort of scatter about the place and try to hide from the Romans. I think if you've got a defended town this size, surely you could have stood up to the Romans. I don't know. No, we don't actually know. You know, it's generally kind of reckoned that most Iron Age hill forts were abandoned at the time that the Romans arrived. This particular one, it's thought that it was reoccupied at some point in the medieval period. And just for the very reason that it was occupied in the Iron Age, it's above all the kind of wet land around here. and it's just a good place to get away from that damp ground and perhaps to defend yourself against any bad guys. So I think there would have been fewer bad guys in the medieval period. It's also thought there was a farm up here at one stage. We're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Certainly the southern half of the plateau, and on maps you can see a very clear dividing line, is flatter than this bit. And it was farmed and cultivated simply because it would have been drier than all the land around it, which would have been pretty useless from a farming point of view. You know, when you look at maps, as I say, the whole area surrounding this is just very wet. It's most of it, you can see it's very marshy. There's some areas that in the past have been reservoirs, and some areas have been dammed areas, dams, is that the word? I mean, if I look at the map that I have, which is probably a couple of decades out of date, then if I position this properly, then just on this side here, on this map, is a fairly sizable bit of water called Whittlemuir Midton Loch. It's not there. I can't see it. So these kind of big bits of water come and go. And I think on this side there was a fairly large tract of land that was flooded to make a reservoir at some point. Fairly recently, in the last few decades, I would think, or maybe sometime in the later stages of the last century. So it's just water everywhere. So if you've got a plateau like this that is so big, it's just ideal for staying on, building your houses away from it all. As far as the I keep forgetting the name of this ancient Celtic tribe, Damnonii, whatever they're called. I think, given that we don't know where the main centre or capital town of that tribe was located, I think there's a fairly good chance that this was it. This is a huge site, a huge Iron Age fort or a defended town, 500 metres by 200 metres. It's massive, as I said earlier, one of the largest hill forts in the country. There is every chance, because this was the area that tribe occupied, and I think there's every chance that this was their centre and their capital town. Weren't towns as we know them now, you know, wouldn't have been a church and a pub and a shop, but they would have lived here and controlled this particular area of Scotland. And I'm going to end the video here. If I can, I think I'll find another way down. That was just very muddy coming up there. There was a lot of confused cows wondering what I was doing. And it's starting to get a little bit darker. So it's only about 3 miles back to Howwood. I think it'd be too early for any place to be open for a beer. I'll just get the train back home. I'm Eddie Burns. Until the next time, take care.